Hello, Facebook. This is Camille Harris, owner of Camille Marie Coaching. Today, I'm going to be talking about some tips and tricks for talking to your child's teacher, or just how to have open communication with your child's teacher, specifically for a child that has a learning disability. Because October is Dyslexia Awareness Month, and so it is my goal to provide information about that, statistics about that, resources for that. So communication with, if your child has any learning disability, communication with their educator is imperative for success, especially in the early years, because you're building a foundation and you know your child better than anyone else. So who better to tell your child's teacher about them than yourself? So starting from the beginning of the school year, really make it a point to introduce yourself to the teacher, and share with the teacher what does and doesn't work for your child. A lot of parents don't want to share some of the behaviors, if they don't want their child, like the teacher, to decide ahead of time that, oh, this is going to be a problematic child. But a way you can avoid that or help your child is by explaining, this is something my child does that can be disruptive in class. Here are tools that can help with that. So tools that have worked in a daycare, tools that have worked at home, tools that have worked with previous teachers. So you're helping set the teacher and your child up for success from the very beginning. Another important thing from the very beginning of the school year to do is to ask the teacher, what is their best form of communication? You're going to want to be having ongoing, continuous communication. And so asking the teacher that question is going to help you know the best way to get feedback from the teacher. So whether it be email, a phone call once a week, and asking if a phone call, what time of day works best for the teacher. If it works best for the teacher right before school starts at 8 o'clock, make yourself available for that time. And then let the teacher know how often you want to be having that contact as just a baseline. A baseline, I want us to be checking in once a week, which if you have a child with a learning disability, I would recommend once a week at a minimum. And then obviously more often if something is coming up that's problematic. And before school starts, if it's an option, if your child has an IEP, a 504 plan, has had assessments for diagnoses, really try to meet with the teacher before the school year starts to go over that 504 plan, that IEP. Some school districts have systems in place for that, but if your school does not, then really work to review that with the teacher ahead of time so that it's really clear what kind of accommodations need to be made for your child. And as the school year goes on, make it a point to share with the teacher what's going well for your child so that the communication isn't always about the negative or the concerns. Let the teacher know what you think that they're doing well so they really feel like it's a collaborative approach and that you value all the efforts they are making with your child. If you have I have a child with a learning disability, my son has dyslexia, I know that teacher, his teacher, has to put forth more effort with him in certain areas and with other students. And I want her to understand how much I value and appreciate that. And I think it's important for parents of children with learning disabilities to recognize that and to really show their appreciation for the teacher. What else? And I think, so most schools do conferences twice a year. In my opinion, that needs to be more frequently if you have a child with a learning disability so that you can track the progress. If you want to double that, make it 4 times a year, whatever you think that needs to look like. But in those meetings, what I recommend having is IEP, 504 plan, accommodations written out, whatever document you have in place, have those there and ask to have documentation of where they're at academically in the areas they're struggling. So writing examples, reading, scoring, so that you can look at the progress that's being made. If there's no progress being made, then assess what needs to be done to change things. And that's why we want to be meeting more than just the standard 2 times a year, because if you're meeting just in November, okay, that's when things are just getting started, but then if you don't meet again till end of April, end of May, which is typical for conferences, then it's almost too late in the school year to really do much about it before they've exited, and now you have to go through the summertime. So have really specific questions in mind for the teacher when you are doing that weekly check-in. You want to be checking in with them about how the child is doing academically in the areas they might struggle with, but you also want to be checking in on how are they doing socially, how are they doing emotionally, how are they doing with keeping their bodies to themselves. If you know that your child struggles with keeping their body to themselves at home, chances are pretty good that they're going to struggle with that at school too. And by getting the feedback from the teacher about what areas they are struggling in, by just being point blank about those questions, then you can give feedback to the teacher about what they can do to help reduce that negative behavior based on what you know already works at home. And if you aren't really sure how to address it, then you and the teacher can take a collaborative approach about how to address that behavior concern. So also having a mutual goal and solutions approach with the teacher. So if you know that your child has anxiety, for example, and your child has a learning disability like dyslexia, which means that they have a struggle, it's a reading disability, they struggle with reading and oftentimes writing as well. So the problem is reading and anxiety. So if they struggle with reading out loud, if that gives them anxiety because of how much they struggle with reading, a solution or an accommodation that you and the teacher can come up with together is, if the teacher is going to have the child read out loud in class, then giving them a warning ahead of time, maybe the day before, hey, we're going to be reading this book in class and this is the chapter or the paragraph I'm going to assign you to read, or not asking the child to read out loud in class, or coming from a permission-based place. Hey, Johnny, is it okay with you if you read out loud, and giving him the permission to say yes or no. And then, on those very specific goals and solutions, like anxiety associated with reading out loud, be checking in with the teacher when you're doing that weekly check-in, just, hey, how are things going in this area? Have you noticed any improvement? Have you noticed what works, what doesn't work? And then just constantly adjusting accordingly. And yeah, I think those are some of the biggest ones. Teachers have such a tremendous responsibility, and the more that we can offer them insight and support how to best work with our child is helping everyone. And so I think those are some really important pieces to just put in place. Those are not systems that are put in place at any school typically. It's something that you as the parent have to advocate for, and it's going to be well with your time to do so. So if you have any other things that have worked well for you, if you are a parent that has a child with learning disability, to be supporting your child in the classroom, supporting your child through the learning process, then go ahead and leave me your tips down below. I would love to read them, being a parent of a child with a learning disability, always looking for new ideas. And that's it. So I hope everyone has a great day. I want to share some really quick exciting news. In the next couple weeks, I'm going to be launching my first parent training. It's going to be about how to support your child with big feels, big emotions. And then I'm also going to be opening my first 2 remote parenting classes, which is really awesome because parents will be able to access the classes online through Zoom instead of me coming to their home. So it'll allow a lot more freedom for parents with busy schedules. Yeah, so have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.